What stuck out to you about from Anthony Edwards kind of igniting this whole thing at All-Star Weekend by rejecting the title of face of the league all the way through to now where LeBron is basically saying, point proven, this whole debate is exactly what I was talking about. Stephen A is doing this and you guys are doing that and gotcha, basically. What part of it perked your attention?
I think just how exhausting all of it is and how like over it I am, just
Yeah.
especially having on Friday on First Take, just being locked into Stephen A's response to LeBron and the fact that he was effectively proving LeBron's point about all this. And I don't even fully agree with LeBron about it because I think there are a lot of flaws in LeBron's argument, especially when you get into him claiming that he never set out to be the face of the NBA when that's very clearly not the case. And you can look at different points throughout his career dating back to even before he entered the league as to pretty clear evidence that he did want to be the face of the league. But I don't care about the gotcha stuff. I don't care about Anthony Edwards. I don't care about like Stephen A. Smith and LeBron James going tit for tat. I think just all of this kind of speaks to like kind of this exhaustive nature about NBA coverage right now and how much of it is focused on stuff that doesn't matter and stuff that really has no end game and stuff that I don't get the sense that anybody was that into. Everything I saw from the reaction to LeBron to the reaction to Stephen A. Smith just felt like one giant collective eye roll. And so I think this is the stuff you and I have talked ad nauseum at this point about the regular season not mattering. And to me, this is I don't know if like how the cause and effect works out this way, but this is definitely a symptom of that where we're not talking about the actual games. We're talking about stuff that really just doesn't matter and that really has no right or wrong or side to take. I just find it all exhausting.
I think the NBA like falls into this for obvious reasons, right? The players are more famous than any other league. And like there's elements where like on the inverse we kind of get this with baseball, but it's because the players aren't famous. So we have that version of the conversation where it's like who the hell even is the face of the league? More like that, whereas this is
Mhm.
like who's going to claim the crown type thing. I always just end up kind of being comparative about it because I always just wonder, as somebody who, like, I enjoy basketball more, I care about the NBA more than the NFL, whatever. I always end up kind of bouncing it off of, like, why does the NFL not work this way? And it just, so, like, the fame of the players is an obvious reason why we care which one of them is the biggest one or the face or whatever is just because we care about all of them more than we do maybe the rest. But there's like another element to it where the NBA is actually much more like the rest of culture here, where we just can't stop talking about stuff. And I know that that is like very hypocritical for people who do a sports media podcast to say, but it is like so much even more granular than like what you and I would typically do on this show. Like we waited multiple weeks to even have this conversation because it felt so navel gazy and like just who actually cares about this. And yet people do, and that is like a fundamental thing that I think the NBA has to get out of its own way from, that is unique to it, where it's just trapped in this loop of constantly like something happens, there's a reaction, and almost before like All-Star night, before the game is even over, we're already speeding up into, well, what does this mean? Who's talking about it the right ways? Who's to this? Who's to that? And it feels like this is just another version of it where it's like, to me, the NBA face of the league is, or the face of the NBA, I should say, is not ever decided upon. Nobody
No.
gives that to somebody. It's sometimes happenstance for, you know, a week in whatever year in the mid 2000s that was, Ron Artest was the face of the NBA for very ugly reasons. And then there's other, and so it's just it feels like the instinctive need with the NBA to have conversations like this. I don't know how if there's anything people within the league can do, or I don't know how it can get out of that spiral because it's clearly it's not making anything better for anybody. And I think that is part of what LeBron was kind of getting at.
Yeah, and it's not to that end. like it's not a real conversation. Like it's not, we don't bestow it. It's not a title. It's not a physical thing that we decide this is the face of the league, nor is it anything a player accepts or declines. Like it's, I mean, you can have guys like Tim Duncan who clearly shy away from that kind of stuff, and that goes into the formula of determining who it is. But it does remind me, I know I've made this point before, of the period between Michael Jordan and LeBron James, where there wasn't a set face of the league. And it's, you do kind of go through these ups and downs of, is it Allen Iverson? Is it Vince Carter? What does it mean if it's Allen Iverson? Is Vince Carter really in the same stratosphere? Like, you're going to go through these, but I don't ever remember it being the primary topic of conversation among NBA fans. Granted, the media landscape was a lot different 20 years ago, but like I vividly remember Steph Curry becoming the face of the league in 2015. And it wasn't some media effort. It was just like, hey, Steph Curry is awesome. And he's playing in this way that's really appealing to fans. And like, all of a sudden, LeBron's not the most popular player in the NBA anymore. And it just happens organically. The other thing, though, I do think is, I think like LeBron's off base. And I think Anthony Edwards is off base, being so sensitive about inside the NBA. Like, that talking point to me has gotten really exhausting, is inside the NBA is too negative. Like I do agree that the league in general needs to do more to celebrate its players and to celebrate its play. But this idea that like talk shows can't be criticizing players, when you turn on First Take or any ESPN studio show on a Monday morning in the fall, and we're talking about like Josh Allen's legacy being on the line. Like, I just think that's a reality of the modern landscape. So to me, that's just where I know I'm kind of all over the place with this, but I don't,
Yeah.
I was beside myself on Friday that this took on the life that it did, because it was such an absurd conversation to me.
I do want to talk about Stephen A. A little bit here, because it is a part of this, and he also, in addition to being on First Take, is the star of the main NBA broadcast partners studio programming. So like he's a character here that matters. But on the Inside the NBA side of things, I mean, I think we've talked about their show went plenty last year when the arms race to get them was playing out, where to me, they're a commercial for the NBA, regardless of what they say. I feel like it's a net positive no matter what even quotes or viral videos come out of any given episode of Inside the NBA. Them being as entertaining and as beloved as they are, and being so connected to the sport of basketball, there's no way you could convince me that that is somehow a bad thing for the NBA. Now, what they say, could it be better? Could it be a little more like researched or based in like concrete evidence? Sure, but they're also dudes in their 50s and 60s. I don't know about you, but when I talk to guys like that, it tends to look a lot like how it does on Inside the NBA, whether it's about the basketball or not. So it's hard for me to pick too many nits there. I would honestly throw shade more at, and we have here too, why has there never been a thing to rise in opposition, not like having a fight with, but just like to balance out the coverage of the NBA, whether that's on ESPN, whether that's a Pat McAfee type of digital show that builds up and gives an antidote if people are so unhappy with Inside the NBA. I think that's a little bit of what JJ Redick was trying to do. There's no clear kind of next step for that, but Stephen A. Smith is, I would say, a lot like the worst elements of Inside the NBA, and he is the most prominent voice on ESPN. He clearly, like, what's funny is LeBron didn't actually name Stephen A. here. Mm-hmm. Stephen A. decided it was about him. Big surprise. And yet I like the part of it that, from the Stephen A. standpoint, that like kind of I care about the most, I guess, was his back and forth with Chiney Ogwumike during that episode of First Take, which reminded me a lot of the debate we had around the WNBA when Monica McNutt called him out last year during, I guess, but kind of the NCAA tournament into the WNBA season time of year. He can't take criticism. He just can't. Stephen A. Smith cannot accept that there may be elements of the way he goes about things and the way he talks about things that anybody could take issue with. And I guess that you get to where he is with the level of confidence that it requires to be so stubborn, but it is a little bit. It feels like everybody but Stephen A. Smith knows that it rubs people the wrong way. And he can't even, it's fine if he doesn't change, but he can't even engage with the criticism, let alone adjust his style. And that feels like, come on, dude. Like that's crazy to me.
Yeah, I think the exhausting part for me, and this is more so Stephen A, although it does apply to inside the NBA to a degree at this point, is like it's not fun to be consuming media to me where the media is a part of the story. Like I don't like watching First Take and knowing, like trying to figure out what angle Stephen A. Smith is coming from because Stephen A. Smith is a part of the story. And so what you were getting at with Chennai,
is that our fault, by the way?
In terms of like covering it?
Well, in terms of the bleeding over just kind of happening, I feel like the people like us make the media the story, and then they think they're the story.
I mean, possibly. I mean, I think I don't know if awful announcing plays a role in like Stephen A. Smith inflating his ego to the degree that it does, but I think he probably would be taking exception with LeBron James's comments regardless. But I do like what I consume the NBA basically at this point through like Bill Simmons' podcast. Like that is like my other than
you're not enjoying this Cavs season. You're not plugged in.
The Cavs beat, not to take anything away from the Cavs beat, it's just not a very big beat. Like it's not like it was when LeBron was here. Like I have friends who cover the team and I consume their content, but it's not, there's not enough of it almost. It's kind of weird. Like we don't have a full-time athletic writer. It's for the best team in the NBA. It's bizarre. Anyways, like I consume it through Bill Simmons and Ryan Russillo, and they are not a part of the story. Sometimes they're a part of the story, but usually not to the degree that Stephen A. Smith or Inside the NBA is. And sometimes they're positive. Sometimes they're negative. Sometimes I agree with them. A lot of the times, especially with Bill, I disagree with him, but like, it's a way to consume it without having to worry about like this third rail of what's in it for them, even though there's some of that with Bill and the Celtics. But like, you get what I'm getting at? Like, it feels like Stephen A. Smith is very self-involved here.
Yes, he is. And I know it sounded like you had something on Chennai before I asked you about
well, I just wanted to say what she said, which was she pointed out midway through First Take, like, look, we entertain, we give our opinions, we do all that, but we're kind of proving LeBron's point because we haven't even talked about Steph Curry's 56-point game yet. And like, that's like, we're sitting here talking about this off the court thing that really doesn't matter instead of celebrating the game. And obviously that's something that Stephen A. Smith took exception to.
Yeah. He went the same route that he did with that Monica McNutt back and forth last year, where he resorts immediately to, Chennai, you're a WNBA, former WNBA player. Gilbert Arenas happened to be on set. I'm talking about the NBA during, the combine and draft season in the NFL, free agencies next week. Who spends more time on basketball than I do compared to all the other it's like, it's so stubborn as to feel like intentional, but I don't even know if it is. I think he really is just that confident, and he should be. He's built First Take into a behemoth. He's the biggest star in sports media. Like, he should feel confident, but it's just like quite literally not what LeBron's criticism was. It's the how, not the what you're talking about. That's the problem. But as far as the how, which you're talking about here, I think it's only going to get worse with that side of things, because you see this as sports media stars increasingly just kind of become like YouTube stars. Right. That machine is fed by drama. Like, everything online, everything on YouTube is just, this creator is mad at this one. This podcast split up for that reason. This person got banned from YouTube for a day because of that flub or that crazy thing they said, or whatever. We all hear about them when they really break through on a national scale, but that is the machine on YouTube. Yeah. And these guys, like, it kind of reminds me of, I called it a pissing contest that Chad Johnson and Cameron had who are like, podcast star guys in the sports media world that we don't talk about a ton on our show, but they're pretty big in their own right. And Chad Johnson's now on First Take here and there, I guess. But it just feels so inorganic a lot of the time. And it does feel like we're starting to bleed where those guys are saying, I offered you a contract and you disrespected me and you're this and that. And okay, I'll show up in Miami. And it's just like, you guys aren't going to fight each other. What the hell are we doing here? Like, you guys host podcasts where you talk about Josh Allen. Like, it's not going to get there, And it feels like it's bleeding over into something like this where you have to generate that kind of me-centered, like, personal barb to get attention, even more than ever before, because people aren't just going to happen to have you on. They have to choose. And if they have to choose, then this is the direction you're going to have to go. So I guess I wasn't as, to sum it up, like I wasn't as, LeBron didn't explain himself enough for me to know how much I agree with LeBron, I guess would be my thing. But I do think that because, again, the NBA is so star-driven, it lends itself to this personal kind of talk more. That's where the face of the league stuff started, but then the negativity and some of the, back and forth like this also gets there where it's an easy excuse to talk about the NBA without talking about the NBA that I don't think other sports quite deal with. And I, again, do think like somebody needs to try to stop that cycle because otherwise it's too easy for it to keep going that way.